All right, welcome to the Primetime Night Owls show is what we're calling it. Our second one with the name, I guess, Matt. And a little bit later, we usually go Sunday or Monday, but with some travel and just different things with our schedules going on, we weren't able to do this until now, Wednesday evening, which is good because it's night and we're the Primetime Night Owls. So
It fits. It fits. Yeah, and now we're actually doing it at night. So,
yeah,
what an amazing fall weather week we've had here. I know everybody
yeah,
can't wait to hear us talk about the weather, but it's just been stunning here in Boulder. And I've just been appreciating it. Brian, how you doing, buddy?
I'm good. It was amazing weather for Arizona on
No
Saturday
kidding.
too. Getting in the 70s rather than 90
Yeah.
for an afternoon game. And um, you know, we're going to recap Arizona a little bit, talk about Cincinnati and some other things, but just since we haven't talked about it, really on air, I guess, since that game, just let's talk about our overall thoughts about that Arizona game. Buffs win 34-7 down in Tucson, and really just kind of from the start took it to the Wildcats.
Yeah, it was that onside kick, the surprise onside
Right.
kick. I could not believe that they tried that, and obviously you and I have talked about that. And, I tend to fall on that's a dumb idea because there's less than a 2% success rate, and you never
Yeah.
want to start a game like that, period. I feel that's kind of like some built up resentment from when Sean Payton did it to start the season 2 years ago for the Broncos, and I had to fight that battle. Well, if they recover. So, anyway, I got some of that built up. But no, that was dumb, in my opinion, to do that to the best quarterback in the country. But it went to show you just how little confidence Arizona's coaching staff had in their team. And that played out throughout the course of the game. They basically said, hey, we know we can't beat you without playing shtick ball. And even then, we're
Yeah.
still probably not going to be able to beat you. They had a good amount of guys down. And I think the other part of this is not a lot of people kind of acknowledge that when you lose Jed Fish and a coaching staff, and he took a lot of players with him, that's not
Yeah.
easy to just turn over. And I know it kind of looks the same because of Fafita and McMillan, but it, to me at least, and I don't know what your opinion is, but it kind of felt a little bit like a shell of what they were last year.
Yeah.
And that's a shame for that program, but at the same time, the Buffs with a carefree second half. I mean, I Nobody was sweating in that second half. It was over at
Right.
halftime. You knew it. They took their spirit. And so nice to have one of those. Feels like we haven't had one of those in a long time. And even
Right.
the UCF game felt a little bit more, kind of tighter than that. It felt like UCF had more fight. So
Yeah.
dominant performance altogether. Second half offense, I think everybody was a little bit disinterested. You'd like to clean some of that stuff up, but outside of that,
Mhm.
pretty close to a flawless performance across the board, in my opinion.
Yeah, yeah, we were talking in the press box at halftime. It's like, we've seen way too much Colorado football to, bank on a win here being up 28-7. But yeah, like we were talking about like Stanford last year. They're up 29-0 and lose that game, things like that. But that Arizona team clearly, you know, didn't have a lot of fight left in it. And it was funny. I texted you the other day. Like it's funny how that game started with Arizona trying to catch the Buffs off guard, and it ends with the Buffs taking mercy on Arizona by
Right.
kneeling in the red zone. Um, and hurts their red zone percentage, I guess. But it's just interesting how that game started and how it ended. But it's funny because Coach Prime mentioned how he thought it was disrespectful they did that. I didn't think so. I thought it was more, if anything, it was showing a lack of respect for their own team. Kind of like you pointed out that
It
like
was desperate.
yeah, it was desperate. And you and I were going back and forth. That's the only reason I didn't mind the move for Arizona is that they were desperate and a reeling team, and if you can get something like that right off the bat and surprise Colorado and you'll get some momentum early, then that's the way they were going to
Yeah.
be in that game. And so it was dumb in that yeah, if you don't get it, you give Shedeur Sanders half the field, and they didn't
And
get it.
surprise, you got a 98% chance not to get that ball. That's why I'm
Right.
saying it's dumb because it's
Yeah,
just
but I
not something that
wonder on
happens.
those percentages though, those are like straight up onsides when they're expecting it. I wonder what the percentage would be on the
You know
surprise
what?
onsides.
I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like you and I might have even gone back and forth on this. Might have been you specifically when that happened in the Broncos game. because we were talking about the surprise on sides, and the surprise on sides percentage is actually higher. It's just
Yeah,
far less frequent because it doesn't happen,
right.
but it's still significantly lower. Now,
Yeah,
I mean, look, it's a close play either way. You just never even want to give even if it's a 50% chance, you don't want to give, yourself a 50% chance of giving Shadur the ball in great position
right.
to do something with it. Just not in college. In the pro, I think sometimes you can kind of bounce back. And with Arizona's defense as banged up as they were, it almost like took the air out of the building like right away.
Right. Yeah.
I felt like the crowd never really got into it except for maybe after their touchdown in the first half. And then CU came out and responded, and it was pretty much all over. But the final score,
Yeah, and that's really, 14-0 very quickly. Arizona scores though, and you think, all right, buckle up a little bit, but then Colorado comes right back with another touchdown. And I thought that touchdown, that third one that made it 21-7, really kind of sealed the deal. Because from that point on, it didn't seem like Arizona had a whole lot of fight left in it. And the Buffs, you got to give them credit. That was a reeling team, but they went and took advantage of it.
yeah.
We've seen a lot of Colorado teams, and really a lot of teams in sports that sometimes play down a little bit in those situations, and they don't take advantage of what's in front of them. Colorado went and took it, and that second half, yes, it was kind of a blah second half, but um, I look more at the first half, as so that's what Colorado is right now. That second half, I do think that they were disinterested a little bit, and took the foot off the gas a little bit, and like, all right, we can coast here. I mean, you mentioned nobody broke a sweat. Travis didn't break a sweat because they took him out of the game at halftime. They're like, yeah, you know what? We're gonna sit Travis the rest of the time. He doesn't need to play. Yeah, they kind of coasted there at the end. They needed that. We don't see Colorado coast to victories very often, and they needed something like that.
I love that you brought up a couple of those points. So I think I said to start this, it was pretty much flawless, and it's by their standards, by past history standards. You go
Yeah,
on the road, that's a pretty flawless game. Now, in
yeah,
truth, it should have been worse, right? I mean, you had two interceptions that should have resulted in
hmm
touchdown scoring drives, and you also had a fumble that should have resulted in a touchdown
hmm
scoring drive. I was
yep,
texting with Brock Heward after the game because he's a buddy of mine, and obviously he called the game for Fox, and he was like, "Wow." Colorado is looking real. And now you have to understand the context here.
hmm
Brock is a Washington Husky, okay? When these two were in the Pac-12, I remember talking to Brock when Coach Prime got hired, and he was like, it could either go really well or it's either going to be a disaster. And I said, in what way could it be a disaster? Even if they don't have on-field success, it's already a massive win. So I
yeah,
think you just throw that argument out. But he was just more talking about the football side of it, I think. But what they did on Saturday was showed more consistency. Their defense continued to travel. I mean, as you brought up the great numbers, first time since 89-90 with consecutive road wins of 24 or more points. Wasn't that the number, Brian?
yeah, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, that's impressive for Colorado. So while I said flawless, I think flawless by past history. For this team, it could have actually been much better. There were some
Yeah,
mistakes, and they left a lot of meat on the bone. So I just wanted to clarify that really quickly. And the other part you just brought up is it was like I kind of you touched on what I said, like it was stress free. They needed a game without chaos. That's
yeah,
what somebody texted me. He was like, "Wow, I was kind of bored," and I was like, "I was loving it."
yeah,
I was a happy board. I mean,
yeah,
give me a hammock, down there on field level, and let me sway in this cool desert breeze because, baby, it's a coasting into the finish in the second half, which they
right.
just haven't had. And I think people have to understand the emotion of games with that much chaos. It's a lot to do week
Mhm.
in and week out, and to kind of get off of that roller coaster was a little refreshing because they had it in neutral, it felt like. And
Yeah,
again, as you brought up, Travis didn't play, in the second half, and really wasn't a big factor. I was right there on the first, missed touchdown. He should have caught that ball. And that
yeah,
was when I was like, oh, like that was a perfect throw from I was like 2 feet away. And
yeah,
then the same thing on the second one felt like maybe, a healthy Travis catches that. They took him out, and we'll touch on him. But as you brought up, I mean, not much more you really could have asked for, except for, I guess, being a little bit sharper and really laying the wood. But it feels like beggars can't be choosers in this race for the Big 12 title that is wet and wild every week.
yeah. I would say the biggest thing I didn't like out of that game was that, and Coach Prime mentioned after the game, was Shador was a little careless with the ball. I mean, he lost. There was a couple fumbles in there. He threw the two picks. That's the first time in 2 years he's thrown two picks. But I don't worry about it because Shador doesn't do that. And that felt like a one-off to me. Like I don't expect that to be a thing with Shador, but that was the only thing I didn't like out of that game was that I mean he's still 250 yards, two
Right,
touchdowns, and he runs for a
right.
score, so he was still pretty fantastic. But that's the one thing I didn't like was that I thought he was a little more. I don't even want to say careless, but just not as careful with the ball as he's been, normally.
Yeah, on that specifically, yes and no to me. The first inter and look, I mean, we're just parsing really words here, but and I'll just tell you because, like I said, I was at field level. The first interception, he's just late. That route is there. It's 3rd and 11. They had one timeout left, and I was like, oh boy, like, you could just tell they weren't lined up, and he's flushed out of the pocket. Routes there, he's just late with the ball. You don't really see that ever, and so that one definitely on him. The first fumbled snap, I'm not exactly sure what Zelinskis thought he heard because Shador never even motioned. He didn't clap. He was coming up to the line of scrimmage to make an adjustment, and Hank just snapped it. And so
Yeah,
it was also a 3rd down situation, and it was loud because it was early. The transfer on the handoff I thought might have been on him. I'm not exactly sure. And then the second interception was. I'm not exactly sure what field position they were, but it was 4th and 3 late in the game. You'd beaten the enemy at that stage, kick the field goal.
yeah.
There, you're up by so much.
They were
Instead,
around they were around the 15-yard line. They were in the red zone.
that's what I'm saying. No, I know
Yeah,
they were in field goal range. I just didn't think it was like 40 plus. It would have been a 35 yarder, I thought, or at least a moderate range field goal. And that one, I
yeah,
I don't know why they went for that 4th and 3. I asked Coach Prime about the situations, and he kind of just said it's how he coaches by feel 100%. It's
yeah,
all by what he's feeling in the moment, and that's kind of how it looks sometimes. It's like, hey, okay, they're going for it in 4th and 3 here when they're up a bunch. I mean, like, I get that, and
yeah,
I think the reason they did that, to be honest, was to get a little offensive momentum because it looked so kind of choppy and maybe disjointed in the second half. Either way, you don't expect Shador to make a play like that, but I'd rather a field goal. You've beaten the opponent. Let's get back to Boulder with
right.
the win. So those were that would be my one thing is I'm not exactly sure. Look, it wasn't his best game, and they beat Arizona handily, which is a massive step in the right direction for this program.
Well, that's my point. I mean, I didn't like that part of it, but it's not a
Right.
concern. It's not
No.
anything I worry about going forward. So,
Yeah, if
um,
that's your biggest concern, I think we're okay.
we're
Yeah.
fine,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
there were a lot of things alike, and it's funny how it's game to game, and you see the run game 148 yards. It's like, all right, run game's back a little bit. Well, yes and no. I mean, Arizona's defense is not Kansas State.
Right.
And especially after they lose Manu late in that game or at some point in that game.
Yeah.
Um, they were really under 100 yards until Charlie got in there and bumped him over the 100-yard mark and well over 100-yard mark. Not saying that it wasn't legit, but it's not like they went out and ran all over the place. They just had some nice timely runs and got some things going. So um, I think opponent has something to do with it. It's week to week with this team, I think, and you're going to have to go with that with this team, especially with the run game. I know the passing game is going to be there week to week, but run game, it's like, okay, what does the opponent look like this week against a
Right.
Kansas State type of team? I still think they're going to struggle. Like when they face Utah in a couple weeks, even though Utah's not what they were, I think they'll struggle to run the ball. Against a Cincinnati, that might be a little bit of a struggle, but I think they can do it. So I think it's a week to week thing with that run game. The nice thing was they got it going a little bit, and when they get it going, that offense looks so much better, in my opinion.
It was great to see that they rushed for almost 150 yards. The more impressive number was that they ran the ball more than they threw the ball. That's the
Yeah.
first time it's happened since Coach Prime's been here. I don't even need to look at the
Well,
numbers
and
to
that and
know that.
that's because they coasted.
Of
They
course.
they could, yeah,
Yeah, but that's also I think it's also a step forward because, and I know it was against CSU and that was personal and they were trying to rub
yeah,
it in there at the end, but they didn't at the end, right? Well,
yeah,
by doing what they did, they kind of took everybody out of harm's way late in the year. It was another, great decision, I think, by this coaching staff. And they got other guys in there, which you don't know
yeah.
how many opportunities you have left to give those
Right.
guys meaningful snaps or any snaps for that matter. So a couple things. You brought up that linebacker. What'd you say his name was? Manu, the Arizona's
Jacob
linebacker?
Manu, yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
my God, the tackle he made on the third down to bring up the fourth down. Bucky and I were standing there like right next to each other on the we were kind of filming it, and he and I just kind of looked. He was like, I mean, there there was no way Augusta wasn't getting in the end zone. And I mean, you heard that
Yeah.
thing up at the top of the stadium. So
Yeah.
I think he's pretty hurt too. So I just wanted to give him his flowers because
He's out for the
undersized.
year. He's out for the year.
Ah, man, that sucks.
Yeah.
Undersized, but packs a punch, right?
Yeah.
So kind of cool to see that. I mean, because they converted the fourth down, it was cool to see that, I guess.
Right.
But you got to tip your hat in a good play made. I think it was less about the amount that they were able to be efficient in the running game. And it was more about the quantity and the commitment to it, which we've talked about ad nauseum,
Hmm.
preseason and during the season and last year. Just when you do that, an opponent has to respect you. And Colorado's so talented, even without Travis on the outside. If you give them even something to think about, Shador should have a lot more time.
Hmm.
And he doesn't have to be at his very best to win every single weekend because that was
Right.
something, at least that I was very concerned. I'll speak for myself on this heading into the year is if you continue to do things the way that you did them last year, you were going to be resorted to, well, we're going to go as far as Shador can take us. And that would be unfortunate to really play that way because there is talent on this team
Yeah.
that can support him. You just have to change the structure of how they're doing some things. And if you listen to the coaching staff and Coach Prime, they definitely made adjustments. They're
Yeah.
not the same team that they were to start the season. And again, just more credit to them and this coaching staff. And on that point in particular, I tried to ask Coach Prime specifically about that. Look, I mean, he took a lot of heat, including from, I don't know if I would say I gave him heat, but it was definitely like, okay. I mean, he took some gambles in hiring some of the guys that he did, and he didn't want to acknowledge it the other day. But the truth
Yeah.
is they've come a long ways, and that is something you should be proud of. And I thought it was a little unfortunate he didn't acknowledge it because it was going to be a good thing about them that look at the foresight that he had to bring in a lot of I know that it was a higher level is what he feels like, but the truth is that Robert Livingston had never called plays before. That is
Yeah.
the truth. That he is a first timer at that. And look at what he is. That's incredible foresight. And yeah, he had great recommendations. And I think it's something that he should be lauded for because at the end of last season, the narrative out there was, well, he can't get good assistant coaches because look at what
Yeah. Yeah.
happened with Sean Lewis. Well,
Yeah.
I promise you that's not going to be the narrative after this season. No chance, which
Yeah.
is a huge feather in their cap, especially if he is planning on being here long term to have that reputation. So I think you're starting to see more people take notice that it is looking more real. It's not looking like it's unsustainable but fun, which I think at times it has
Yeah.
in the past. That's not what it looks like right now, and that there's a reason why we can talk about even a potential Big 12 title race.
Yeah. And go back to your point from the press conference. It's unfortunate because you were trying to compliment and turn it into a good thing with Coach Prime, and
He
he
didn't want to hear
he
it.
for some reason took it as
Yeah.
an attack,
Yeah.
a criticism or whatever. So it was kind of weird, but yeah, I mean, look, when he explains his hiring process and everything, I hope people listen to it because
I know.
it's I don't want to say brilliant, but I mean it for those that don't think he can do this job,
Yeah.
right? Listen to some of these things and say, no, listen to how he hired Robert Livingston. What he said was, yeah, he hasn't done that. However, he coached DBs. And what he was saying the other day was DBs are some of the hardest people to cover
Right.
or to coach
To coach.
because of the personalities, things like that.
And
So,
the position. And
and
the
the
position.
position.
Yeah.
And so he's basically not basically, he said, look, I went to a friend of mine, Adam Packman Jones, like, how does this guy coach you guys?
Right.
A great recommendation. I went
Right.
to a good friend of mine, Mike Zimmer. How does this guy coach? Great recommendation. So he's doing his homework, and that's what he's telling everybody is like,
Right.
I didn't just go out there, "Ah, man, I can't find a DC. Mike Zimmer says, well, this guy's good. Okay, I'll hire him. No, he went and did some nice due
Well,
diligence.
I think everybody assumed that, but you never know what it's
Right.
going to look like,
I'm just
right?
saying when he talks about the depth of, he didn't just get a recommendation from Mike Zimmer and say, okay, fine, I'll do it. Like, no, he did some research and like, I want to talk to Adam Packman Jones, who's a friend of mine that has played for this guy. and so he
Sure,
didn't
but
go
yeah,
into it.
I was just gonna say alternatively, like he definitely did that last year too, and in some positions it definitely didn't work out. Now they didn't have as many, as much
Right,
time, and it
right,
was a
right.
limited pool. I get that, but at the same time, I think it's worth mentioning that 7 games through this season so far, you've got a lot of guys meshing and cohesive, and if you're watching well off, I just think they have elevated their level of coaching this year overall, and I think a lot of it is because of everybody else in the room. But the most of it, in my opinion, is because of Coach Prime. There is he is not, in my opinion, and maybe he would debate this, so maybe this is just me reading into it, but
Yeah,
I think there's a totally different air about him right now than there was at many times last year because I think he's really hungry. Like he knows that he can taste what they can do, and he knows that if they just put in the work, that it's all there for the taking. Where last year, I don't know how much anybody really believed that, especially in some of those games, even though they were close. But
yeah,
I just think it's important to credit them because I'm seeing some things that have me going, wow, if you're trying to stick around long term, you are setting up a good foundation. And I
yeah,
think a lot of people heading into the year, based in he acknowledged this the other day too. At sometimes last year, it didn't look like they knew what they were doing. Okay.
right.
It
Hmm.
didn't. That's the truth.
Yeah,
And he acknowledged as much. So don't call me hating because those were his words.
yeah,
Okay. So he acknowledged that, but they've cleaned up a lot. And, it's a compliment to the job that he has done and that they have done as a collective to be sitting in the position that they're in right now. They've earned it, and
hmm,
nobody can debate that. And they've earned it beyond a shadow of a doubt,
yeah,
where you don't hear people poking holes in things. Sure, you may have played Arizona, but you beat the crap out of them.
right,
There's no poking holes in that, and you should have beat
right.
them worse.
Yeah,
So I think it's important we acknowledge that the respect is being earned there because it's being earned on the football field and everything else is falling into place. And I love to see it. It's great to see.
yeah. And you know what I haven't heard in a long time is read anything is any stories about the culture issues at Colorado.
Shocking.
Because
Yeah.
all of a sudden, like I think people
Must be a good
realize, like,
culture if
huh,
they're winning, right?
yeah, it must be a good culture.
Yeah.
It's the same culture as it was when those other articles were coming out
Yep.
that were, you know, bogus. So,
Yep.
yeah, everything we're seeing. I mean, I don't know about you, but do you get any sort of negative vibe whatsoever? I mean, the culture has been pretty
No.
good.
No, the culture. No, I've never have. No, no, no. I just, I think I kind of take that like, do you have any negative vibe about the season? I don't
I mean,
right
about just
now.
about this team and like the makeup of everything. There's, and obviously winning cures a lot of it, but I mean, I think that the culture they had set is lending itself to the winning. I think it's helped
Yeah.
create the winning.
Yeah, the adversity has. The fact that they've
Right.
seen so many different games,
Right.
and Shador kind of acknowledged that. I don't know if it was after the game the other night where he said, "Look, last year we kind of saw a little bit of everything, so we're kind of prepared for most
Yeah.
situations this year or any way a game could go." The one thing I'll say, and we kind of talk about, hey, what do you look forward to, right? In on this show, we talked about how the Baylor and the UCF game, we're going to prove whether or not we should be taking this team seriously, right? And we talked about this 3 game stretch being the proving grounds for whether or not they're a legitimate Big 12 contender. Well, if you go 2 and you wanted 3-0, should
Mhm.
have been three, should have probably been 2-0 to this stage, but you let one slip. So now you got to be 2-1. Otherwise, you're not in the race, most likely coming down the stretch. At
Yeah.
least the way things look at the moment in time. And they know as much. They talk about how win out, win out. You've heard that across the
Yeah.
board from a bunch of different coaching staffs, coaching members, excuse me. So the one thing I want to say though is now they've gotten past where they were last year. Now you're further ahead in the journey than you've been.
Yeah.
Okay. I know it's 5 wins, and they can tell us that they've done that at Jackson, which is true. They have. They had some very successful seasons.
Hmm.
This is just a different beast. I think last year proved it. The beginning of this year has
Yeah.
proved it. Okay. There's no denying it. And later in the year, it's going to take more and more and more and more. And it's going to be a situation where, as a coaching staff, you've got to make sure everybody's dialed in at all times. And that job will be harder and harder and harder to do just because of fatigue. The season wears on, right? Even if you're hungry and motivated, it's going to be one of those situations where you don't really have any time to let things slip. And I don't think they will. It's just
Yeah.
something that I wanted to, kind of my thoughts looking forward that, hey, man, understand this is road not traveled yet. And a lot of these guys, maybe you've done this at Jackson, but a lot of the players didn't. So you've
Yeah.
got to make sure that everybody in that locker room understands what this time of year means, what this time of year requires, the kind of work, the kind of effort, the kind of focus. And I was watching Well Off today, and Coach Prime was all over that. And so I was really glad to see that because, hey man, it just gets tougher. And teams want it more. You think Cincinnati,
Well,
who's in the same position they are, isn't coming in here on Saturday wanting it badly. So yeah, they know that. It's just again, don't think that just because a few of you have done it, everybody has. And I don't think they have operated that way at all.
well, I mean, yeah, you look around the team. I mean, Will Shepard came from Vanderbilt, which did not, I mean, they're doing great right now, but they did not win when he was there. LeJounte
Right.
Wester didn't have winning seasons at FAU. Jimmy Horn went through a 1-11 season at South Florida. So there's a lot of guys on this team that haven't done this yet. And so yeah, it is new territory, but there's a big opportunity here. And this game is interesting this week because I don't know about you, but as I look at Cincinnati, there's so many similarities between these two teams right now. In that, I mean, even statistically, like I'm looking at statistics, I'm looking at all these different categories. I'm like, there's a lot of places in the Big 12 rankings on different categories where Colorado's in one spot and Cincinnati's just like one or two spots right around them, and so they're similar in a lot of ways. Like scoring offense, Colorado's 31, Cincinnati's 30. Scoring defense, they're within a couple points of each other. So both teams came in. Colorado's projected 11th in this conference, Cincinnati 14th, and now here they are. The winner really is in a good spot to contend. Neither one of these teams, I think, were projected to be a bowl game, and yet they're both probably going to be. And so I think both of them are kind of programs that are coming off of bad years. They've had nice starts and they're gaining a lot of confidence. And I see a lot of similarities between these two programs. I think it's a big game. I mean, this is one, Matt, that started the year. I didn't see any gimmies on Colorado's schedule, but I said this before. There was 4 games I looked at and said, you have to win those. And it was CSU, North Dakota State, Baylor, and Cincinnati. They're 3-0 in those games right now. This is the 4th one. I think this is a tougher game than I thought it was going to be, but it's one you got to win.
Absolutely, it's one you got to win. And you're right. There are some similarities here for sure. And as I mentioned, they're coming in basically the same exact spot that
Yeah,
CU is right now. By the way, it's UC versus CU, the battle of UC versus anyway.
there you go.
Yeah, there you go. The more you know, Brian. That's where we need the star, the shooting star across the screen. I'm watching this team, and to me, they've got a little bit of everything that CU has seen to this point, right? Like I think you there's not that much of a difference between Sawyer Robertson and between Brendan Zorsby. I think
Yeah,
they're kind of the same guys. I think Zorsby can throw the ball a little bit better.
yeah,
Although, oh, did you see what Baylor did down
right.
in Lubbock? I mean, you could have knocked me over with a feather when I looked at the score
Yeah,
when I got back to the hotel in Phoenix that night. I was
yeah,
like 59. That Baylor up 59.
right. Yeah,
Anyway, um, I mean, Robertson had 5 touchdowns, 0 interceptions in that game. Anyway,
right.
so Zorsby, I think they've seen a little bit of him, right? They saw that a little bit in Colin Miller, too, bit of a run threat. And there's a lot of window dressing in their offense, right? Kansas State did a lot of that. North Dakota State did some of that. Even Nebraska to a very small degree. It was a little bit more traditional, for Matt Rule there as far as, not as much formational variety and certainly not, not as much pre-snap motion, I think, as you're going to see. Like Cincinnati loves to show you a bunch of things. They'll get into tight formations, bunch formations. They'll got,
Mhm.
2, 3 guys in the backfield. They're bringing a guy across. The key for Colorado, I think, defensively in this game is just making sure you know where the ball is at all times and making
Yeah.
sure you're responsible to your job and your assignment. And isn't that gosh, I feel like we heard that recently. Maybe that was on Well Off that I'm thinking back to because, I think Coach Prime said it. It's like, hey, once you play as a unit defensively, nobody try and be a hero. If you do your 111th, then everybody's going to come through and we have what it takes to win this game. But the
Yeah.
guys who get outside that and get undisciplined and don't do their jobs, that's when we get beat, which is kind of what happened, I think, against Kansas State. It's going to be a big test. They've got the running game with Pryor and the Kiner kid. I think his name's Kiner, right?
Yep.
And then they got the receiver and Xavier Henderson, who might be the best receiver they've seen to this point. Kobe Hudson and well, not McMillan. McMillan,
Yeah, I was gonna say
McMillan was,
McMillan.
but he's
Yeah,
probably like two, and maybe Kobe Hudson would be three. Yeah, sorry, McMillan is clearly the best, and they
yeah,
clamped him, by the way. What do you have?
yeah.
5 catches, 38 yards. He was a non-storyline.
Right.
So I think you've seen a little bit of everything. It's more about you. I kind of said this about the Arizona game. It's more about you this week. If Colorado doesn't beat themselves, I've got them winning this football game, and it's interesting to see the movement in the line too.
Yeah. I mean, yes, I agree. It is more about you, if you're CU. I think it always is though, but I think this is one of those games that there's very little margin for error because I think Cincinnati is good enough and playing with enough confidence that
Hmm.
if you're off a little bit, they're going to take this one from you because this is a team that I mean, look, they're 4 points away from being undefeated. I mean, they lost by one to Pitt, they lost by three to
Yep,
who was it? Was it Tech? Can't remember who they lost.
I got it right here. Pitt and yeah, it was Tech 44-41
Yeah, yeah.
in Lubbock though.
Yeah, I'd say, but still, I mean, they're 4 points away from being undefeated. This is a confident football team that they're not going to be phased by coming into Boulder, and so yes, it is more about the Buffs, but I think that you had the way Arizona's going right now. There was some margin for error the other day.
Sure.
I think the margin for error is much thinner this week.
Oh,
The
different quality of opponent. I
oh
mean,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
that goes without
So I
saying.
mean, the Buffs have got to be they've got to play a better football game than they did. Well, if they play like they did in the first half, they'll be fine. But overall they've got to play a better football game. I think this is a better opponent. And the other thing too, I think it's a real thing. Matt and Coach Prime acknowledged it that they haven't done great in these night games. And he even said, like, look, we're better during the day because that's when we practice. And they've those night games are 2-1 in those games that started at 6 p.m. or later, but they haven't looked great in those games. Kansas State, they lost it. Baylor, they sort of needed um, a miracle, on that last play of regulation. They needed that Hail Mary pass to get it to overtime. And North Dakota State, it was kind of all right, we got through it. I mean, that was one that Coach Prime walked in the press conference and said, "You ever feel like you won, or do you ever win, but you feel like you lost?"
Yeah.
So those are the night games, and so he said they're going to make some adjustments. I don't know what those are. You can't really change the practice time because you got class to worry about, but they've got to make some uh, maybe game day adjustments. But they've got to show that they can play a little bit better at night because those have been slow starts, it's kind of some sluggish games.
Yeah, for sure. I just don't want to let that be an excuse because it'd be a
No,
very soft one. Sorry, the games at night, we're not as good at night. You what? Like
yeah,
that is
no, it's not an
unacceptable.
excuse, but it's got to
Yeah.
change.
Oh, 100%. And I think
Yeah.
he acknowledges as
Yes. Yeah.
much because
Yep.
guess where the buck stops on that one?
Oh yeah.
With the
And
head honcho. And
oh
he
yeah, he
acknowledged
knows
as
that.
much.
Yeah.
And he
Yeah.
knows that. I'm not saying he
Yeah.
doesn't. I'm saying there's a reason that they're going to do things differently is because if
Right.
you're doing things getting the same result, well, let's try and mix it up, see if we can't figure this thing out. And you
Right.
talked about the practice times. They have practiced later, like the night or two before games. I believe when they've had night games this year, they definitely did. The walkthroughs have been at night
Walkthroughs
before.
are different, yeah, because you can
Yeah,
do
yeah,
it.
for sure. But the
Yeah.
other part of it is I think they skipped the pep rally the whole team did before the Kansas State game. I would expect them not to be there as well. I mean, that just, that makes sense if you're going to do the
Yeah.
nighttime walkthrough. Why is it harder? Because who wants to play football at 8 o'clock at night, right? I
Right.
mean, like who wants to kick off at that time? It's
Yeah.
stupid. But it's not an excuse. And with so much out there in front of you, I really hope we don't see that lackluster, kind of lackadaisical, kind of oof, just off here, just rhythmically out of sync. I don't know if that
Yeah.
means you got to do things, as you mentioned, differently on game day. But yeah, I think they can do a little bit there. There is something right now with the coach Primera at nighttime at Folsom that just feels like chaos. And it's probably
Right.
because that's really what Oregon State was the only one that wasn't wild down the stretch that kicked off at night last year. I mean, that really wasn't like a crazy finish. CSU was nuts. Stanford was nuts last
Hmm.
year. And then Oregon State was the only other one that kicked off at night, if I have that correct, at
Was
Folsom
Oregon
last
State
year.
night?
Yeah, for sure. It was at night.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And then this year, I mean, Baylor and that's it, right?
Well, North Dakota State was 6 p.m.
Was 6 p.m. Yeah, yeah. And
Baylor
that
was
was a
6
little
p.m.
chaotic. Baylor was late, and then of course Kansas State. So
Yeah.
there is something about it, and I think he's right. But I think that's a
Mhm.
mental thing. I mean, what do we need? Extra smelling salts in the locker room? I don't know
Right.
what's going on, but that's not a valid, if that's a problem, it shouldn't be. And I
Yeah.
expect Coach Prime to iron that out this week.
Yeah. Well, and if it's chaos, I hope it's because it's just two good football teams and not
Agreed.
because the Buffs
Yeah. Yeah.
didn't come out and play well. I mean, look, they fell behind by 14 to Baylor and K State at home. Not saying you can't do that and recover because we know they can when you have Shador, but you don't want to. And, they need to not let that happen. So part of that, they had Travis in both of those games. Uh, they need Travis to get back. They were able to get through Arizona, but they need Travis to get back for a lot of reasons. Travis's Heisman campaign needs it. The Buffs need him to be back to normal, and I think it was a positive sign this week. Coach Prime said, Travis is going to be more involved. He's got more pep in his step. He's looking more like himself. That's a good thing.
I, yes, it is. And we saw him the other day, give clap for Coach Prime after the presser. I
Yeah,
don't know how that's the case because I'm pretty sure he got dinged up again in the game. I know they said it was precautionary. I'm going to take their word for it. Even Travis just said tonight he released an episode of his podcast. I'm 100%.
yeah.
So, hey, I'm not doubting him. I'll take their word for it. I hope he is. It just didn't feel like that after that game. He's going to need to be the rest of the year for the Heisman. I think that's kind of secondary right now, if I'm being
Oh
honest
yeah,
with
for
you.
sure, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know you know that too. I just think that right now, like as we're getting later in the year, as you're starting to cement yourself more and more as a contender
Hmm.
for the conference, that matters less and less and
Oh
less.
yeah,
At
yeah.
the end of the year, even for Travis, I can guarantee you, I know he's been talking about it and they've been trying to get him to open up a little bit, and they've been successful with it. It was just really unfortunate timing with the injury. I know even he would tell you that he
Yeah.
would if he had to give up the Heisman for the Big 12 title, I think that is a an
No
exchange that
brainer.
he would
Yeah.
happily make. But
The,
yes, they need him back, Brian. They need him back. I mean, Travis is Travis,
the
man.
irony in that is that you would think that being a contender in the Big 12 would increase those Heisman odds, but being a contender in the Big 12 makes that less important. It's if you've got to rest Travis a little bit, if he's only got to play, you know, 60 snaps this week instead of 120 because that's what's better for the team, then you do that. And so, but yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing him get back because it feels now like it's been a while since we've seen Travis be Travis, just because
It's
it's
been two
been,
weeks.
well,
Yeah,
2 weeks and
2 weeks.
there was a buy in there. So it's really
Sure.
UCF, which was,
Yeah, that's a good point.
almost a month ago. And so, I think Buff fans, I know me, I want to see a Travis game again. And, another one, Matt, moving off of Travis is, and I asked Coach Prime about this the other day, I want to see a Jimmy Horn game. Jimmy's been a little quiet,
Mm.
he had a massive game against North Dakota State. And, I like what Coach Prime said. He's like, look, Jimmy's been pretty effective. It's just he's opened things up for a lot of other people. He's just now the catches. But I'd like to see Jimmy have a Jimmy game where he's got 7 catches for 120 and a touchdown, something like that. Jimmy needs that.
Yeah, Jimmy. Jimmy needs that. Jimmy's going to the hole.
I gotta tell you,
Jimmy.
when he answered that question and the amount of times he said Jimmy, and
That's a
I was
Seinfeld joke,
transcribing
everybody.
that, I'm thinking all I could think about was that Seinfeld episode, and it was just making me laugh.
Well, you just did it to me too.
I
So,
know.
maybe it was intentional. Yeah. Look, man, I'd love that. It just is all about game by game. And yeah, it'd be great to see Jimmy
And I
get the
know it
football.
doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's
Yeah.
LeJohntay or
Yeah.
Will Shepherd or whoever, but I would just like to see a Jimmy Horn game.
Sure. Put that out there. And I hope we get one because I love
Yeah.
Jimmy. Yeah, Jimmy's just an awesome young man.
Yeah.
He's definitely one of my favorites on the team for sure. Just really good people. It'd be great. It'd be great.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that LeJohntay isn't also like coming into his own
Oh
with
yeah.
the
Yeah.
relationship with Shador. So for me, it's less about that. I think for the guys, as Coach Prime brought up the other day, it would be nice to see. I mean, clearly, but it's play by play, game by game,
Right, right.
and but I will say on that note, like here, what I want to see offensively, this is the time of year when you've got to start layering more and more into your offense, and the foundation that you've built is got to pay off now. And when
Yeah.
I say that, I'm talking about Get back to your pre-snap motion, the creativity. That stuff I don't think we've seen as much as we did even in the UCF and the Baylor game. Like we that needs to come back into the offense, some creativity. And here's the other thing, okay? And I've said this on my channel, but at some point before Travis Hunter goes to the NFL, we need to see the young man throw the ball. Okay? Kid can huck it. All right.
Yeah.
And I know Jimmy did it last year. So if Travis, I don't know if it's this week, but if Travis's shoulder is Gucci, then I'd like to see it at some point because everybody's coming down so hard when you give them the ball in those reverses, in those
Yeah.
sweeps. Like that is on film plenty, and people are going to be ready for that
Right. Right.
look. I
Yeah.
think that's something they're setting up. I don't know when it's going to happen, and I'm sorry if I tipped someone else off on that one, but I can see it coming. I'd like to see that, but different things, and it's tough to want to take the ball out of Shadur's hands. I understand that, but this is the time of year when I think back to 2016 and what that team did to get that over the finish line and win the
Mhm.
Pac-12 South. They had to go to more Cepho QB power. They had to get kind of pull away from the passing game in general and kind of pare things down, right? And
Yeah.
stick to what they did best. And the other thing is their quick game was much better against Arizona. Ball was getting out fast. That was a point of emphasis, but the formations were tighter, more slants, more outs, right? Like a
Yeah.
bunch more stuff within 5 yards. And look at how much, how easy it was for their offense to just move the ball down the field.
Right.
Pass, run. Here's Augustive picking up a few, and you're putting yourself into manageable situations, especially if you get the third down. And again, just continue building. And I think Pat Shermer deserves a lot of credit for the game plan he came with to Arizona State because I think it was better than the one that they had out of the bye week. I do.
Yeah. I also want to see Travis kick an extra point at some point. I just want to see it.
Can he run Ralphie out too?
I mean, honestly, if they have another game where it's like this last Saturday,
Why not, Brian? If
I would
they're
love
up
to
by
see
that
it.
much.
Yeah, we've seen him do it and goofing around the indoor. I'd love to see it. Okay, predictions real quick because I want to get to one other thing before we get out of here. But predictions on this game. I'll go
Mm,
first since
hmm
since you have a sip.
hmm
Um, I think Colorado. I love the way they're playing right now. I think they go out and get a win. I think this is a tough opponent, though. I don't think it's going to be easy. I'm going Colorado 30, Cincinnati 24. I think that they're going to have to earn this one, but I think that they get it done, and it'll be an entertaining football game.
Yeah, I'm with you. Cincinnati's no joke. If you beat yourself, they will beat you, as you brought
Yeah.
up earlier.
Mhm.
They can run the ball, they can throw the ball. Zorsby does a great job getting the ball out quick. They've got kind of thunder and lightning with Pryor and with Kiner. Kiner's
Yeah.
their big back who's physical. Reminds me a tiny bit of DJ Giddens with his yard after contact ability. And
Yeah.
Pryor, if that offensive line, which I think is underrated, their offensive line, they do a really good job. Sometimes you look at what they do and that hole is, I mean, there's
Well,
nobody for miles.
yeah, that O line, I don't know if you know this, but that's the same group they had every game last year. That's the
It
same starting
shows.
five that they've had since the start of last year, other than one of their guys who they're getting back, or maybe just got back, missed a couple games with injury this year. But it's basically the same five they've had for now a year and a half. So yeah, it shows.
But it really shows. Like some of those runs, you go, God, I mean, what a breakdown. But you just see
Yeah,
linemen they do their jobs and they know what
yeah,
they're doing. Again, another one of those teams that I think is really well coached. Scott
yeah,
Satterfield, that's right.
yeah,
I think he
yeah,
does a really good job with that
yeah.
team. And I think Coach Prime's right. CU's got the edge defensively, but they definitely run the ball better than CU does. And that's not even
Right, right,
close. So,
right.
so what you can't get into here is the situation where your offense doesn't extend drives because if you're not converting on third downs this week, that's going to be that'll get them beat, right? Like
Yeah,
it Cincinnati's a good football team now. I think you probably make the argument that they're the best team left on the schedule.
you can make that argument. Yeah,
I think pretty easily at this point with
yeah.
the way everybody else is playing. So,
The way it's
I
sitting
mean,
right now, absolutely. Yeah.
so for me, I mean, there is zero overlooking these guys. If you know your
Mhm.
team isn't as sharp at night, you know you got a good opponent. I mean,
Yeah.
we may not want chaos, but we may get it on Saturday night because you got two good football teams. Give me
Yeah.
31-27 Colorado in a late touchdown to win the game. I think it's
Okay.
going to be something like that.
Yeah. Okay.
Again, heart rate going crazy. But I'll tell you this. It just doesn't seem like one of those where Colorado's going to get that like dominant statement win at home because Cincinnati's that good, right?
Yeah.
However, they're due for one of those at some point this year. That, I think it's bothering them that they've looked as good as they have on the road, but haven't at home. This would be a monster week to change that narrative. So I'm looking
Oh, yeah.
forward to it in every part of it.
If they look like that at home, great. If not, but it's still 31
A win's a
27, you
win.
get a win.
Take it. Yeah, I
Great.
don't
Take it
care.
and move on to next week.
No
So,
style points here. Get it
yeah,
across the finish line.
right. Yeah. And obviously, if they get a win this week, they're bowl eligible. For the first time, I'll say legitimately since 2016, because 2020 was
Yeah.
whatever.
But they got to
So,
finish. I think that would be my key word is
yeah,
finish
obviously.
for
Yeah, for
this
sure.
week.
Yeah.
Second halves, end of drives, finish this week. Because look, I mean, you don't want to look back and go, the two that kept us out of the Big 12 title were out on our home field
Right.
against teams we feel like we should have beaten. So
Right. Yeah.
big one.
And you got to get Cincy off the field too. They're one of the better teams in the Big 12 on third down, offensively. So,
Good
if
point.
they win this, they're in a bowl. They're bowl eligible. And so, one last thing I want to talk to you about is, and I know it's early. There's a lot of things. They still got to get to win number 6, but
Careful.
bowl projections are big. And I don't love getting into this, but it's kind of fun to see it. Once they're
Yeah.
actually close to it. And there's been a lot of times we get to late October, Matt, and Colorado's not even involved because I don't even look at them, because why would I? you know?
Well, so let's talk before we get into that. Remind people the situation for the next two seasons, even though Colorado's in the Big 12, the bowls
Yeah.
that they're eligible for. Can you remind everybody of that
Yeah,
for
it's
us?
still, I mean, the teams that were in the Pac-12 are still contractually obligated or contractually bound to those Pac-12 bowl games.
Right.
So that's the Holiday Bowl, that's the Alamo Bowl, that's the Las Vegas Bowl, things like that. So,
What
yeah,
else is it? The Alamo Bowl, it's not the Holiday Bowl anymore, right? It's the LA Bowl, right? I'm
no,
pretty sure.
that's
Is it the Holiday Bowl and then there's
yeah.
the LA Bowl
Then there's the LA Bowl.
and the Gasparilla Bowl, something like that? There's
Well,
one in Shreveport.
there's
There's
the
one in El Paso.
Independence Bowl, there's the Sun
That's El
Bowl.
Paso.
Sun Bowl is El Paso.
Oh,
Independence
Sun
Bowl is
Bowl's
Shreveport.
that's it.
So yeah, so it's those type of bowls. But I pulled out three. So I want to talk about them real quick. USA Today has Colorado going to the Holiday Bowl.
Can we just clarify last time the potential destinations that they could play if they don't play in the college football playoff? Not necessarily the bowls, the locations.
Well, yeah, I don't have it all in front of me, but like,
I think it's Shreveport. I think it's San Antonio. I think it's El Paso. I think it's LA, Vegas. That's it.
well, I saw one bowl projection as ASU playing in a bowl game in Phoenix, the Guarantee Bowl. So I think that's one as well.
Okay.
That
Okay.
used to be the Arizona Bowl, I
You could
believe.
sign me up for Phoenix too. Phoenix, Vegas, or California.
Yeah,
I mean Texas. So sorry, Elmo Bowl.
yeah. I've covered two bowl games in my life. They're both the Alamo Bowl, so I'd like something
Me
different.
too.
But anyway, so there's three I looked at. USA Today, they have Holiday Bowl versus Duke. CBS has Las Vegas Bowl versus South Carolina, and Athlon has Las Vegas Bowl versus Missouri.
Oh boy, South Carolina, Missouri would be a blast. I mean, Duke would
Yeah,
be too, but those two other schools have stars. Missouri with Brady Cook and Luther Burden. Although at
yeah,
that point, I doubt Luther Burden's going to be playing. Like that's another part of this, depending upon what bowl game, and we get into that conversation. But I'd much rather cross that bridge when we get there. Fun
right,
to talk about, though. Fun
right,
to talk about and think about. I mean, you watch South Carolina; they should have beat Alabama.
right.
Alabama escaped that game. I mean, they're no joke either. I mean, that's a good program. So
Well, yeah, I'm not looking to project who's going to win, because look, honestly, if the Buffs go to the Las Vegas Bowl, I could see Travis Hunter and Shedeur Sanders not playing either. So, um,
I was hinting at that. I didn't
I
know if you
know.
really wanted to
I'm just
bring
saying.
that up.
I'm not.
I don't know what's gonna happen. I don't know
Who knows
what's
what they
gonna
decide?
happen.
I'm just
Yeah,
saying that we see that all the time. That, like, if they're
common
in,
sense. Yeah,
like Coach Prime was saying the other day, they want to get Miss Peggy to a nice bowl because she's fancy, right?
right.
If they're in a bowl that's not one of the higher ones, if they're at the Sun Bowl, the Independence Bowl, and it's like one of those lower tier ones, do some of their guys want to play? So that's why I don't want to see who's going to win, but they're fun matchups in that. I like all three of those matchups because they're teams we don't see. I mean, Missouri, they used to play them all the time. It'd be fun to see that matchup again. But South Carolina, I'm not sure they've ever played them. Duke, I'm not sure they've ever played them. But it's more destination. I would love to go to San Diego over Christmas.
San Diego, I would accept LA. I wouldn't be thrilled with LA over
Yeah,
Christmas. I mean, that would be a little rough. San Diego signed me up. I mean, absolutely, all day, every day.
yeah,
Vegas, Phoenix. Yeah, I'm good. I'd rather not spend Christmas in Shreveport or El
right.
Paso,
Well, and
but or San Antonio for that matter.
I did notice on a couple of those
Huh.
projections, they had CSU going to the Idaho Potato Bowl. So I wouldn't
Yeah.
want Boise in December.
How many wins did they have? Three?
CSU?
Yeah.
No, I think they're at
Are they
four. I think
are they at four now?
they're going to go to a bowl because the Mountain West is garbage.
Hmm.
But they'll be in a bowl,
The toilet bowl.
right? But and I'm not trying to put down CSU. I'm just saying
I am.
I would not want to go to Boise for a bowl
No.
game in December. Boise, I'm sure, is a nice town. I would not want to go there in December for a bowl game.
Yeah, it's got to be better than Moscow for
Right.
sure. Yeah, I
Well,
mean,
and the whole point of all this is just it's kind of cool. We're getting in late October. The Buffs are actually in bowl projections because we're not used to that around here. So,
no.
but first things first, get win number 6. I think they get it this week, and then you go into a bye week already bowl eligible.
Yeah, you're right, man. I mean, 2020, obviously COVID year. How many players did Carl Durrell take down to San Antonio? Like 40 some guys, like 46 guys or
It
something like
was
that?
not a lot. I mean, there was a lot of guys that were out, and Texas had a lot of guys out too. I mean, they had a ton of guys that actually opted out.
Yeah, I
And
remember
like
that.
good players, like they decided to go to the NFL, but they also had some injuries. But um, yeah, I don't know what it was. It was, I think it was 50 some scholarship guys out of the 85.
It was crazy. I mean, they were playing tons of walk-ons if memory serves. And
Yeah,
and look, I mean, outside of that, it would be 2016, and that team was way too hurt to compete at that stage. I mean, even after
yeah,
all the time off,
right,
they were still banged up, and nobody opted out. Everybody played.
right.
That's kind of the sad part there. They all played, and they
Because
still
opting
got
out
killed.
wasn't much of a thing back then. But
No, no,
the
no.
other
It's
thing about
funny how time
2020 is,
changes.
yes, they went to a bowl game, but I've always maintained that if 2020 was normal and Colorado played
Oh,
that normal 12 game schedule, they would not have gotten to 6 wins.
no.
They would,
They got to four as it stood. I mean,
right. They were 4-2. I
yeah.
think they would have been 4-8, because yeah, that wasn't that great of a football team is my point. And so a lot
I
of things
mean,
happened in 2020. I'm like, I guess I have to acknowledge that. Like Matt, here's the thing. Here's one of the things about this game. So take out 2020 because of what I just said. Outside of 2020, the Buffs are 0-11, the last 11, well, 11 game losing streak when playing for bowl eligibility.
oh,
And that's what they're doing this week
why'd you have to say that?
because it's
That's
going to end this
brutal.
because it's going to end this week. But
Oh, you're saying sending this week.
it's ending this week. But I mean, 2017,
Hey,
they were 5-3. And no,
that
five
should
and
be that should be in the team meeting. I'm
yeah,
sorry. That deserves its own slide right
they
there.
they were 5-4 and then lost the last three. 2018, they're 5-0 and ranked in the top 25. LaVisca gets hurt. They don't win again. They finish 5-7. And then the next year, 2019, with Mel, they were actually 5-6 and playing for the bowl game that last week
Oh,
and lost. And so no, that was
yeah.
with that was Mel, yeah.
Yeah.
And they lost that one well. So 11 straight games they've lost when playing for bowl eligibility, not counting
Gosh.
2020 because we don't count that. Because
And they
nobody knew what bowl eligibility meant, that we want to play, because nobody was wanting to play bowl games that year.
No,
So
that's
I
that's
don't
very
count
true.
2020.
No, that's very true, actually. Yeah, it's one of those things where, okay, you may not have had anything to do with that because they didn't, this current regime,
Yeah,
but that should be one that's the buck stops here with that one.
yeah,
I mean, that would be unfortunate because it would have bigger repercussions than just bowl eligibility. That would
yeah,
still be on the line out of the
right,
bye week. But again, we talked about it. Like you break the season down in segments. Here comes the end of another segment. Your second to last one. Oh, by the way,
yeah,
because coming out of the bye, there's your home stretch, and you
yeah,
want to be in it to win it. You don't want to
yeah,
be out of this thing on the sidelines because it's right there for your taking. And to do that, as Coach Prime has acknowledged, you got to win out, and it's
right,
1-0 every single week. And look, I think that they have learned enough in this microwaved process to be really ready for this moment and
yeah,
not anxious about it. They should
Yeah.
be excited about it because they've earned this opportunity, and this should be something that they're foaming at the mouth to go get. Because once you get six, it changes.
Yeah.
There'll be pressure that's lifted off of you, even in
Yeah.
the Big 12 race. You still want to do that, but you'll be freed up a little bit to think about everything else because then we don't have to talk about, well, if Miss Peggy's in we're going to get her a bolt. No, that's taken care of.
Yeah.
That's in the corner. Now we're going to go into Thanksgiving looking to, feed the family some juicy turkey with a really nice
Right.
finish here in a home stretch.
Yeah. Yeah. And you'd much rather go into this bye 6-2 than 5-3. That looks way different coming out of a bye going on the road. Um, yeah. So lots of reasons, but I think they get it done this week. And Matt, we'll see you at Folsom on late Saturday night.
Sounds good. Sounds good. You taking a nap on Saturday?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll see you there, buddy.
All right. Talk to you later. Bye.
See ya.